All right, we are rolling, and today I am speaking with Russell, who is currently in the UK instead of China because of the coronavirus. And to start, thank you for participating in this interview slash conversation. And I'd like you to just take a moment or two to maybe sort of introduce yourself.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for inviting me to come and speak. So, as you said, my name's Russell, and I have been in China for about 5 years, teaching in a range of different institutions from universities to high schools, kindergartens, language centers, these learning centers. So, I feel like I have a good kind of grasp on the education system in China, and I was also studying at a university part-time, um, studying some Chinese while I was there. And yeah, over the last 5 years since being in China, I feel like I've learned and experienced quite a lot of the culture. And I've been lucky enough to travel a lot around China as well, which is something that I really enjoy. And yeah, as you said, unfortunately, at the moment, I am back in the UK simply because of the coronavirus. I did have plans to go back to Hong Kong before the virus um, be, kind of become widespread. And yeah, since then, I'm back in London with my family. Do have plans to return. Definitely will be returning at some point, but obviously safety comes first, and it's just a case of waiting for them to reopen the border.
Sure. And I want to clarify that when you say go back to Hong Kong, I think what you mean is go to Hong Kong to live and work for the first time. I know you've visited a few times, but the experience you speak of was all mainland China, correct?
Yep, as you said, I think it's important to make that distinction between mainland and Hong Kong. And yeah, all of my teaching experience has been in the mainland China, various cities from places like Wuhan in Hubei province and Beijing, um, a few different other areas working part time as well. But mostly those two areas was where I was working a lot of the time. And although I have visited Hong Kong a few times before, yeah, it would be my first time going there to live. So all of this experience was, yeah, as you said, it just in the mainland.
Yeah, and again, for people who don't know much about China or haven't traveled, I think we'd both agree mainland and mainland China and Hong Kong are very different in many ways. Now, there's some similar, I don't know, culture or heritage or whatever you want to call it, but they're still, in my mind, very different places. In
Yeah,
spite of the similarities they share, it's kind of like North Korea and South Korea or East and West Berlin, maybe.
yeah.
Like you can
I think
find
there's a
some,
good
yeah.
comparison. Yeah, I
Okay,
think that's a
cool.
great comparison. Yeah, I think if anyone has ever been to both those places and has a good comparison and has a good idea of how they are, they're very much night and day. You have a very westernized, English speaking, approachable area, at least in my opinion, in Hong
Yeah,
Kong, where everything is kind of clean, a bit more clean, tidy. People are a bit more westernized, a bit more open to conversation and opinions, differing opinions, for certainly differing opinions. Um, and whereas mainland China is a lot more closed, they have this very one-track mindset. Obviously, all of this is in my opinion, my experience,
yeah,
and yeah, I certainly believe that is it very much two different countries, even though they are considered to be mainland China. And obviously, I'm agreeing that all of them come under the umbrella of China, but I think the distinction has to be made between the mainland and then other areas such as Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau, for example.
yeah. No, I fully agree with that. And again, I've spent some years in China. I've met a lot of people, and you're one of the more knowledgeable people. A lot of people I've met in China, they're there for a year or two, and then that's it. Or maybe they go there for a couple of years, but they don't really travel much or learn the language. But in your case, you're a bit more like me, more so on the language side even. But you were there for 5 years, which is longer than a lot of people, and you took the time to become familiar with the language, fairly proficient. You've traveled around a lot, you've seen a lot, so yeah, I'm happy to speak with you specifically because of those reasons. So the next question I want to ask you is, when and why did you first go to China? When did you go, and what sort of how did that happen? What led you there from the UK to Wuhan, China?
Right. Okay. Yeah, and thanks for all that praise. I did really appreciate that. It is nice to be there, and I think, without coming off the topic too much, I think when you speak to a lot of foreigners that are in China, you get this um, you get this idea that many foreigners that come to China, mainland China, I'm talking about mainland China to work, quite often they don't last more than 6 months or a year because there are so many obstacles kind of to overcome, and I'm sure we're going to speak about them later on
Yeah.
in the interview. So yeah, back to the question, when and where and how did I decide to come to mainland China? I had just recently finished, this was 2014, I believe, sorry, 2015, and I'd recently graduated from my master's degree from Essex University, where I studied psychology, and I was working part-time or full-time, somewhere between the two, at a local college, which is actually the college that I went to. Now, when I'd say the word college, I know in the US, kind of college and university is almost synonymous with each other.
Synonymous. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the UK, we kind of have a distinction between the two. College is the what we call A levels, where we do our A level exam, which is the university entrance exams. We do that for 2 years. It's kind of like a follow up or an extra added on 2 years from high school. So usually you finish high school in the UK at 16, and then the next 2 years you study at a college for your A level examination, and then you go on to university or not. And I was working at a college, so the stepping from high school into university, and I was teaching and tutoring the college entrance exams. And it's kind of a funny story. While I was at that college, I was teaching psychology and kind of prepping the students for their exams. And there was a massive map. I remember there was a giant world map in the psychology class. I'm not sure why psychology class had a world map, but it was there anyway. And I was often kind of checking it and looking at it every chance I got, thinking, yeah, I have an interest in traveling. I had traveled a little bit before, but I wasn't completely happy with teaching in the UK because it was rather strict. It was rather a lot of work. In the nice sense, I appreciate all the teachers in the UK that work so hard. Um, but there was a lot of rules and regulations, and I had to do another 2 years of study. And after doing my degree and my master's degree, I wasn't ready to throw myself back into academics just yet and start studying again for 2 years to become a qualified teacher. So for me, it was kind of like trying to find a shortcut into doing something, into earning money. Where could I work and also kind of enjoy traveling at the same time? And when I looked it up, teaching abroad online, because that was kind of the next natural progression. Okay, I have some experience teaching, but I don't want to do it in the UK. Okay, well, maybe I could do it abroad. There were just so many. As soon as I Googled, teach abroad, the first thing that comes up, at least in 2015, was the huge amount of jobs in mainland China. It was just amazing. Not only that, I mean, you can teach in Asia anywhere, but I think it was just simply the offers. I had to double check the money that they were offering, the fact it was a free apartment. They're talking about working less than 20 hours a week and
Yeah.
teaching English. Yeah, I mean, when you see these kind of packages being advertised, it's no wonder there is a huge surge in foreigners coming to China. And yeah, unfortunately, you do tend to get a lot of undesirable people because they look at that offer and they think, oh yeah, I'm going to take it. And China is such a big country
Yeah.
that they're pretty desperate for teachers. So you
Yeah.
kind of get like this phenomenon where you have a huge disparity in the number of foreign teachers in China, and they're offering such a huge kind of benefit anywhere else working,
Yeah.
other than maybe Saudi Arabia, Middle East
Right.
is the only other place I could think of that would compare to the level of comfort that China is offering you. Obviously, there's a
Right.
lot more that comes with that territory that you kind of realize when you get to China. But yeah, starting back to where we were, that was kind of the push for me. Was where could I where could I travel? And as well, the fact that mainland China was only asking for somebody that had a degree, and that was it. They didn't even need
Yeah.
teaching experience. They didn't even need a TEFL certificate. They didn't
Yeah.
need, 3 or 4 years, and they didn't need recommendation letters. It was simply, do you have a degree? Yes. And even at that time,
And are you a native speaker?
yeah, oh yeah, that's another thing. But I think that even with that, they're a bit pliable. And I think even with the degree, back in 2015, I feel like um, I feel like now there's more of a push towards having a degree. But back then, you didn't even need a degree. I'm pretty sure they were just getting away with a TEFL, the TEFL
Oh yeah.
certificate. Yeah, and they're like a dime
For
a
some
dozen.
jobs, yeah.
They're not even, yeah, exactly, yeah, especially for kindergartens. But kindergartens are the ones that are worth, are willing to pay more money because they
Right.
a lot of foreigners don't want to teach there.
And it's more hours generally than like a university or a high school.
Yeah, more hours, and yeah, you don't usually get the summer and winter vacation time as much.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
and
So
quite often they won't give you a free apartment either.
so it's more like the biggest advantage would be with like, yeah, kindergarten is a higher salary, but yeah, all the other benefits seem to sort of go out the window. So it depends, like, yeah, what you're looking for. And if you want to go to China just for a year to kind of travel and make enough money to be comfortable, kindergarten's probably not the best way. But if you just want to go and, yeah, earn and save money for a year or two. But anyway, we'll get into that later. I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Good stuff,
Sure.
though.
Yeah.
So the next question I want to ask is, so the first year you went to China, maybe you had some sort of notion of what it would be like. I know when I went, I kind of thought it would be modern and developed. I was sort of thinking of it as like Hong Kong, like the way I imagined. Like when I went to Hong Kong, it was pretty much how I imagined it, which was also how I imagined mainland China, Wuhan. But when I got there, it was totally different, and a lot of things really surprised me about just the culture. Ask you, having said all that, what were some of maybe the first things during, I don't know, your first week, your first month, your first year, that surprised you about China, the culture, the education system? What surprised you?
Wow, there was a lot of surprises. I think I had the same, yeah, definitely. I think I had the same impression you did before coming to China. I thought they were going to be hugely technologically advanced. I thought everybody was going to speak English. I thought everything was going to be kind of new and tidy and techno. I thought it was going to be more like what I expected Japan, or as you said, Hong Kong to be like. Now I haven't been to Japan, but obviously knowing a bit about Japan, seeing it on videos or movies or being in Hong Kong, for example, I expected a
Right.
level of proficiency, technological advancement, and don't get me wrong, they did have that, but it wasn't what I was expecting. There were huge amounts of areas of China that were completely underdeveloped, and really I should have expected that because it's such a
Right.
huge country, but it was just a shock. And
Right.
I think the biggest thing was when I arrived in China, first thing I noticed was nobody speaks English. Basically, nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm walking around we finally arrive at the school, and I'm walking around the campus on my first day, and luckily there is two other foreign teachers there. Although they weren't native speakers, but they had kind of I don't know, found a way to work their teaching English, even though they were from Brazil and Italy, and they were all English teachers. I was the only native speaker there.
Say that. Okay, can you repeat that last part? It broke off for a second.
Yeah, okay. So when I first arrived on campus, I was actually working at a university. And when I arrived on the campus, I was surprised the amount of people that couldn't speak English, Chinese people that couldn't speak English. And luckily enough, there were other
Right.
foreigners working there. There were two other foreigners. One was from Brazil and one was from Italy. But the school had employed them to also be English teachers.
Uh-huh.
But the way they got around it was they were
Right.
actually
Right.
they were actually speakers of Esperanto, that kind of made up language. I know all languages are kind of made up, but this
Right.
one doesn't have a native country. So they employed them as quote unquote Esperanto teachers. But when they realized nobody wanted to learn Esperanto at the university, they hired them as Esperanto teachers, but got them to teach as English teachers. So that's kind of how they worked around the legal issues.
Wow.
And also, we have to remind ourselves that in
Wow.
2014, you didn't technically have to be a native speaker to teach English. You just had to have experience or have a degree from an English-speaking country. They've since changed that law. Yeah.
Yeah. And the laws do change quite a lot, it seems. Like what's law one year might be different the next year. So it seems like the laws are always sort of in flux.
Yeah. Changes on a whim, constantly changes.
Yeah.
What 1 minute you need all these documents for the visa, another minute non-native speakers can't teach English. But you'll find that in China, another surprise is that they have these laws or they have rules in place, but nobody follows these rules or laws.
Right. Especially like I often joke that the traffic laws are more like suggestions.
Yeah, guides, suggestions. You can follow this. And I'll never forget one of the first conversations I had with a Chinese person in English, luckily, was that they said to me, "Oh, you have a lot of free time. You can work part-time." And I said, "Oh, but my contract forbids it." And they were another teacher at the school. They were a Chinese teacher. And I told them my contract forbids working part-time. And they said, it doesn't matter as long as you don't
get... another school.
Yeah, as long as you don't get caught. That was basically what his reply. As long as you don't get caught, it's fine.
Oh, wait, sorry, the last bit broke off. As long as you don't get caught. And then what did you say?
Yeah, so as I was talking to the Chinese guy who was a teacher at the school, he asked me if I wanted to work part-time. And I said that, I would like to, but the contract forbids me. This was during the time where I would read a contract in China inside out and take it as gospel. I've since stopped reading contracts because in China they don't mean anything because they don't follow the rules.
It's nothing, yeah.
Yeah,
no, they don't.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, I said I can't do that.
Keep going.
Yeah, sorry. So I said I can't do that because of the contract, and he said it doesn't matter as long as you don't get caught, as long as they don't find out, it's no problem. You can just do it. And I find that was pretty much the rule all the way through my 5 years. That seemed to be the law. As long as nobody finds out, people just do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, was there anything like maybe regarding like the classroom, the way they organize or schedule things, or the way the students behave that was surprising to you compared to like the UK?
Yeah, going into the Chinese classroom with no experience teaching Chinese for the very first time, no experience teaching Chinese students. I only had experience teaching British students. I found that the biggest shock for me in the classroom was that students just didn't like to speak. They didn't like to speak out, and they were worried about making mistakes, or they were worried about being wrong, or they just were shy, and they didn't like conversing, especially with native speakers, because they always felt that their English wasn't good enough. And to some extent, I understand that, but it wasn't like that in any other country I've ever been to. It was so restricted that the students quite often didn't respond whenever you asked a question or a question was posed to the classroom. Nobody would respond. It would just be silent, and that was a really big surprise for me. I didn't really know how to overcome that. It took a long time for me to realize, okay, students need a bit more coaxing. They need a bit more kind of coddling. You need to take it step by step and understand that they can make mistakes, because that was a huge problem. Nobody would speak, and it made teaching English very difficult.
Yeah, it's like you have to sort of give them permission and let them know it's okay to make mistakes, I feel.
Yeah, I think that was it. You had to let them know that, they wouldn't be punished, or they wouldn't be called out in front of their peers for making a mistake. And I found that one of the biggest ways to kind of overcome that in the classroom was that if I spoke a little bit of Chinese. After a few weeks, I would learn a couple of phrases, and when I would throw them into the class, obviously all the students would laugh when I got the pronunciation wrong, or I got the word wrong, or the character wrong, or I would write a character on the board. And it was kind of showing them a bit of humility, like, yeah, it's okay to make mistakes, and we can joke about it. We can have fun, and you can laugh at me making mistakes, and it's more of an informal class. And I think students in general in China find English classes with foreigners as almost like kind of like a goof off class. Some of them take it more seriously than others.
Yeah.
But even the schools don't take the foreign classes seriously.
No. Which is kind of nice, because then I don't feel too pressured. I feel like as long as morale is high and we're enjoying ourselves, and I'm giving them opportunities to speak, and they're willing to speak more and more, sometimes like a coach than a teacher. And I'm just kind of like, I just sometimes have to give them confidence. I just have to like sort of prim and get them to step out of their comfort zone. And then when they do, like, applaud them. And sometimes I feel like that's like at least half the job.
Yeah. A lot of the time I felt like that. I felt like it was just getting them to speak out loud. And that was a tricky part, I think. And I think that's what a lot of Chinese teachers just wanted you to do. They just wanted you to install a bit more confidence into them, and maybe undo a little bit of the Chinese kind of studying ethic. Because when you look at the way Chinese study English, and I'm sure it's the same when they study other areas, at least I've seen it, when you ask them how they study English, a lot of the time they are fluent in writing and reading, and maybe even listening, but their speaking is so low down on priorities because they are afraid to make mistakes, therefore they can't improve on their spoken language.
I think that's a big part of it, but I also think part of it has to do with the fact, and I could be wrong, but as far as I know, like the Gaokao, their college entrance exam, but I guess these are college students anyway, but they're such an exam-based culture. And I don't think they often, unless they're studying for IELTS, but a lot of their general exams that have English or whatever are going to be written or listening based, and not necessarily, not to my knowledge, speaking based. So I think in one sense, there's less incentive. I also think there's, not a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
And it is kind of frustrating sometimes, because again, people listening to this might not know specifically what we're talking about, but often if you go to China to teach English, you might get a writing class, you might get a reading class, whatever, but very often half or more or all of your classes will be oral English. So it's literally like a spoken English class. So you go in there with the expectation that, okay, this entire class is about speaking the language. And then, when they're shy and reluctant, or you try to engage and it's just silent, it's like, what are their expectations here? This isn't a lecture-based class where I come in and I talk to them about history for 90 minutes or 45 minutes and they just listen and take notes. It's like, no, this is like a proactive class. It's like if you join a basketball team, you're expected to play. You don't go to basketball club, join the team, and then just sit on the bench and never play ball.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. And I think you make a good point. A lot of the exams are kind of paper-based, and that's fine. But I think it kind of shows how China views exams and studying as a whole. They see it as kind of like teaching to the test. And this was a big problem where, we don't need to speak the language. As long as you can pass the test, then it means on paper you can speak it.
Right.
And I think that's an issue. And I think because of that, it kind of stifles creativity, because you're only ever learning, regurgitating information for a test. You're never taught to think critically. You're never told to think outside of the box or understand what you're learning. You're just told to remember it and never question it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's definitely like some of the points I'm raised in the written component of this project. So
Right.
yeah, I'm glad to hear you have the same opinion as well. Anyway, let me stop here so we don't lose this first part, and then we'll resume in a moment and go on to the next set of questions.
All right, no problem.